the Capital One Saver Card. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. It's spring, a time when Mecklenburg County managers' thoughts turn to budgets. And again this year, there is likely a property tax increase coming your way. We're going to talk about that, about priorities, and about the county manager herself. This is Dena Diorio's final budget as she prepares to retire at the end of June. So we'll spend some time looking back as well as forward with Dena and with Mecklenburg County Budget Director Adrian Cox. They are both with us. Thank you for being here. Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Dena, you recently presented this budget, this alleged budget, the 2026 proposal to County Commission. It is, as I said, your last budget. I have to ask, is it a relief?
Well, I think, of course, it's a relief. As county manager, this is my 12th budget, but again, it wasn't the budget I was hoping for in terms of having available revenue to spend, and it was very tight in that regard. So it's not exactly what I was hoping for, and I think we did the best we could under the circumstances.
This is a $2.5 billion budget. I think that would surprise a lot of people in Mecklenburg County that we have a budget that big. How much of an increase is that over the last budget you put forth?
Well, actually, it's a very small increase. It's 1.5% over fiscal year 2025, which is probably the smallest increase we've had since I've been county manager. So we really tried hard to keep spending as tight as possible.
So it's a small increase over last year. I think it's about $39 million. But put that into perspective. What does $39 million buy us over the course of a year at Mecklenburg County? It's hard to say, I would guess.
Well, with a $2.5 billion budget, I mean, you could buy a lot of different things with $39 million, but when you put it in that perspective, it is a very, very small increase compared to prior years.
So is this is a kind of a bare bones budget in a way, and we're going to talk about the prospect of a property tax increase for the second year in a row. Have revenues decreased, or are they just not increasing fast enough to keep up with county needs?
It's the latter. I mean, we're still seeing growth in property values and property taxes, but the real slowdown has been in the area of sales tax. So we were having double-digit growth in sales tax coming out of the pandemic, and we've really seen that slow to around 3% a year, which is very, very low compared to what we've seen in prior years, and that's really putting a strain on our ability to pay for the things that we need to pay. And I don't know, Adrian, you may have more information on that.
Yeah, so in total, so if you were to look at just our discretionary revenues, what we call our county dollar revenues, we're looking at growth of about $41 million, which is less than 3%. And our expenses are growing at a much faster pace. So compensation, funding for education, and then just sustaining the existing operations, security maintenance, that comes to over $74 million. So that's why we have this budget gap.
Talk to me about why there was an uptick in, I guess, consumer spending, because consumer spending drives sales tax revenues. Why there was this uptick following the pandemic, because it was a particularly inflationary period. Is that why sales tax revenues were up, because things cost more and therefore the taxes collected were more, Adrian? Is that why?
I think that's part of it. We certainly did see some higher sales tax collection during those years following the pandemic, but we're not seeing that now.
And I
We
think people
live
were home, people were home, and they were doing a lot of projects at home and spending more just being home. And so we did see some double-digit increases in sales tax during that time.
And we live in one of the fastest growing areas of the country. More people are moving here every single day. And this is probably, we've always been told that growth is good. If you don't grow, your community is dying. And people don't understand why it's not paying for itself. Why haven't tax dollars that the newcomers bring with them and pay into our coffers kept pace with the expenses associated with growth?
Well, the expenses have simply grown at a faster pace, at least for this year. As I mentioned, a lot of the things that we have to pay for, our maintenance, our utilities, those are going up at a at a faster pace than what our revenues are.
In addition to that, we are seeing a slowdown in construction. And so the property tax increases that we would normally see, we're not seeing those because of the slowdown in the construction industry.
And we're talking about residential construction or just construction overall?
Construction overall.
Prior to the FY25 budget, the one that we're in now, I guess, you pointed out in your budget, Dena, in your presentation for that budget, that significant revenue growth allowed you to provide much needed services and to invest in board dictated priorities and expand into new services. But now that revenue growth has slowed, something you pointed to in your presentation last year. Has it continued to slow, or are we at stasis?
Well, that remains to be seen. We don't know. I mean, the economy, we've seen some things in the economy that could indicate that we may be seeing some additional strain. But we can't really predict the future. We're hopeful that it at least sustains at the level we're at, but we don't really know for sure. And we could start to see some erosion even in the sales tax numbers that we're seeing now.
Things have been more expensive since the pandemic. Inflation seems to have gotten somewhat under control. It's not going up. The prices aren't coming down, but the rate of inflation doesn't seem to be increasing as much as it was. But now we're facing, Adrian, the prospect of these tariffs and what tariffs may do to expenses. How worried are you about that?
Well, that certainly does present some uncertainty. And I think that is part of why the manager's recommended budget is not utilizing a lot of fund balance and is a fairly conservative budget because of the tariffs and because of other things, we're facing some uncertainty going into the next years.
It isn't just tariffs, however. In this budget proposal, Dena writes, quote, "We are facing potential and in some respects frightening changes in funding and policy." I'm not sure which one of you to ask about that. Dena, I'll start with you. Why the word frightening?
Well, we're seeing what's happening at the federal level, the attempts to roll back federal spending. And in the areas that the county cares about, particularly things Medicaid, other health and human services programs, significantly impact people who live here in Mecklenburg County. And so those things are going to be things that the county's going to have to face going forward if there's additional requirements that come to the county because of those cuts at the federal level. So we're watching that very carefully. And I really wanted to make sure that as my last budget, I put forward something that would really help the county to be able to support or absorb any kind of, not all of it, we certainly couldn't do that, but really position the county to be able to respond in some respects to some of those federal rollbacks.
There have been several cutbacks in personnel, downsizing of agencies, cuts in federal funding programs in all aspects of what the federal government has funded over the years, traditionally at least. And last night, of course, there was an overnight session of Congress in the dead of night to talk about the potential of their tax cuts, which would also include, it would seem to me, potential for reduction in Medicare and Medicaid monies coming to communities around the country. And people tend to think about what happens on Capitol Hill and in Washington as something that is Washington based. But it trickles down dramatically, does it not, to our communities? So, Adrian, what would a substantial cut to Medicaid or to Medicare or to Obamacare, which I think is also on the table, what would that mean to the county and its ability to provide resources to our residents?
So that would depend a lot on how our state responds, and it would certainly be challenging if those benefits went away.
Are you in conversation? Have you had conversations with state lawmakers? Because we know that the state is adamant that unless the federal government funds 90% of Medicaid, they're out.
The county certainly has. Our legislative liaisons have been working with the state as well as contacts in the federal government. And we're, trying to monitor, like all organizations, to see what these impacts are going to be.
Do you share the word frightening that Dena used to describe the prospect of all of this?
I think that's accurate. I think that as these things unfold, there's going to be difficult decisions in the future, depending on how they may impact the county.
In your presentation to the commission, Dena, in addition to slowing revenues and rising costs, you pointed out that we have a structural deficit from the current budget. I take it that we knew that we would have that structural deficit last year, even though you proposed that budget, it passed with a tax increase. We knew that was coming down the pike, correct?
That's correct. When the Board of County Commissioners adopted the budget for 2025, instead of implementing the full tax increase that I recommended, they reduced it by a half a cent and used part of our reserves to fund that gap. And so we knew going into FY26 that we would have a $14 million budget gap that would have to be solved for. And so, yes, we knew going into this that we had a structural deficit that needed to be plugged. And so we did that. But even with that, we still didn't have enough revenue to cover the entire gap.
And the state, I believe, has to operate on a balanced budget. Their inflows have to match their outflows, et cetera. Do we have the same mandate here, or can we run a budget deficit for a couple of years like the federal government does?
Well, our budget is required to be balanced, and it was balanced. The problem was that we used non-recurring revenue to make it balanced. And so if you don't take care of that and you continue to operate with a structural deficit, once your reserves run out, then you really have a big issue. And so we really, we have a fund balance policy, which requires the board to not operate that way over the long term.
What are non-recurring revenues? Give me an example.
Well, I mean, our reserves are non-recurring, so it's not revenue like a property tax or a sales tax or fees or charges that we know we're going to get every single year. Reserves are non-recurring, and so every year you start the year with a budget gap because it's not a revenue that you can continue to count on year after year.
So you say that the overarching theme of this year's budget recommendation is that of protection and service, and you say that this budget involves cuts across every county department. How much cutting, and where, if at all, will taxpayers notice those cuts? How will it impact services?
So the total amount of the cuts were $13.8 million. Every county department did take a cut, but we really, asked our departments to find ways to provide us cuts that would not impact service. And I think they did an amazing job doing that. We also looked at our nonprofits that we fund. And when we had our retreat in January and the board asked us to really look at everything and to cut as much as we could, we made it very clear that the sector that was going to be impacted the most was our nonprofit sector. We have been funding many nonprofits for many years, and we really wanted to look at them and really look at those that we believed were not performing the way we expected them to, or services not aligning to board priorities, or the cost of service per individual was exceedingly high. So we looked at all of our nonprofits and cut $6.2 million out of existing nonprofits, and we also cut a little over $2 million to our community service grant process or program, which basically eliminated that. We fund nonprofits on an annual basis for various programs. And this year we eliminated the program and are going to take another look at that, or they will take another look at that next year and see whether they want to bring that back and in what form they want to bring that back.
If we weren't facing this budget crunch, would we have taken that pair of scissors to these nonprofits, or would we have just let things go?
Well, every year we look at everything. I don't know that we would have looked at them as closely as we did this year. I think it's a good exercise that we need to be doing on a regular basis. Yeah. But cutting nonprofit organizations is a very difficult thing to do. They do rely on county dollars to be able to serve their clients. And so these are very tough decisions to make.
A lot more to talk about with regard to the budget with Dena Diorio, the county manager, and Adrian Cox, the county budget director, when we come back.
On the next Charlotte Talks, the new U.S. Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina. Russ Ferguson was appointed by Attorney General Pam Bondi and leads an office of nearly 100 federal prosecutors and support personnel serving 32 counties. He comes with extensive experience in leadership roles with the Mecklenburg County Bar. We talk about his priorities, including eliminating cartels, reducing drug trafficking, violent crimes, and more, tomorrow morning at 9.
Engineers in the U.S. and China are competing to revolutionize the battery technology for electric vehicles.
We can build an amazing battery industry here. We have the opportunity here to really, really accelerate.
I'm Ari Shapiro. The Great Battery Race and what it means for drivers, companies, and the planet on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Join us at 4 o'clock for All Things Considered on WFAE. Support comes from WFAE listeners and Sandstone Health and Rehabilitation, providing short-term rehabilitation services across North Carolina and committed to helping support recovery with comprehensive and individualized care. Dedicated to compassionate care for all, sandstonehealth.com. And Catawba Lands Conservancy and Carolina Thread Trail, hosting outdoor public programs in North and South Carolina on June 7th for National Trails Day. Registration at carolinathreadtrail.org/NTD.
It's Charlotte Talks on Listener Funded 90.7 WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking budget, Mecklenburg County budget, and a prospect of a tax increase again in a moment or two. We'll get to that with Dena Diorio. She is Mecklenburg County's manager. Adrian Cox is with us, Mecklenburg County budget director. It's always easier to spend money than to cut expenses. That people who have their own budgets understand that. When DOGE did their cuts at the federal level, they appeared to do it, at least from the outside, alarmingly indiscriminately. I'm going to wager, Adrian, that when the county sat down to put together this budget, they took a more surgical, more analytical, more careful approach. How do you determine what to cut and by how much?
Yep, thank you. We certainly did take a more thoughtful approach. So first off, we ask our departments to analyze their budgets and to make some recommendations so that we would be able to look at that. But also, my team in the Office of Management and Budget, we did an independent review of all of our 265 different services or different programs that make up our budget. We looked for some of the things that the manager mentioned. What were the performance outcomes? How were those outcomes aligned to our priorities? What were the cost per unit, or the cost per individual served, whether or not these were state or federal requirements that we had to meet, what other options there were for folks who may have been being served, and then internally looking at, if there were any activities that didn't align to the core functions. And of course, like we do every year, we look for underspending or underutilization that may have been there. So we went through that practice and we put together several different options, and we work with leadership to kind of look through all of them.
So Dena mentioned that one of the hard parts of this was going through what we fund in terms of nonprofits, how much we give them, and where we need to make cuts because they're not performing at levels that the county had anticipated. You've gone through the budget and you've made cuts across every single county department, as I understand it. Adrian, give me an example other than nonprofits where you have had to take a pair of scissors and cut things out.
So we had to do some reductions to some printing and supplies in a couple of different departments. We've also were able to find some savings or better leverage some funding because we have some new software coming on, and we can kind of utilize that rather than using the existing software. So it really varies throughout the different services that the agencies provide. We were intentional to try to not reduce services for residents as much as possible. So we kind of took it's a different approach for each department, but those are some of the things that we found.
Dena, you guys go through this every year. That's part of your job, coming up with a new budget and analyzing what went right and what went wrong in the previous year with the previous amount of money that you had to work with. And in the past, you have come through and found efficiencies, savings by implementing changes that increase efficiencies in every department, which have minimized the pain of cuts to programs and services in the past. You've been doing this now for 11 years, and I understand that over those 11 years, you've come up with $200 million in savings. According to your report on the budget, you kind of squeezed the turnip dry. So what are your options now, aside from raising taxes?
Well, I think that's a really important point. We do this every year. We have saved $200 million over the last 11 years. And so, the departments did step up and they gave us everything that they could. So now we really needed to focus on our nonprofit partners, and we needed to make those changes there. But that's the part that is concerning going forward. If expenses continue to increase faster than revenue, um, and we don't have anywhere else to cut, it's either going to be a cut to real services or it's going to be, continued tax increases. And I think as everybody remembers, I believe in fiscal year 28 is the next tax increase that's slated for our capital improvement program. So we have future tax increases already built in because of our capital program. So that's why this budget is so lean and just to really put the county in a position to try to move forward in the most responsible way possible, knowing that we've got some of these things that we're going to have to deal with in future years.
Despite the cuts you've made or you felt you had to make, and which may be adopted by the commission or not, I suppose this is just a proposed budget, and the sales tax being relatively flat, you are still recommending funding CMS at the full level of their budget request. Remind us, what did they ask for?
The 93% or 94% of what they asked for was related to compensation for their employees. And so, we know, and we did the same thing on the county side, when I do my budget, I take care of county employees first because they're the ones that come to work every day and provide these critical services. So I make sure that my employees are well taken care of. And Dr. Hill, when she presented her budget recommendation to the county, it was the same philosophy. 94% of those dollars are going to compensation for employees, making sure our teacher supplement is as high as it can possibly be, making sure that their classified employees are making a livable wage. And so philosophically, we agree that that is the most important thing that we both need to be doing. I fully funded my employees, and I fully funded her employees.
Obviously, every year when the school comes to you and when you look at your budget, I'm sure that employee salaries and benefits costs rise every single year. And they came to you, CMS came to the county asking for $28 million more than the previous year. And as you say, that's for salary for teachers and staff. Teacher and staff salaries are funded by the state, with local supplements being kicked in by the county. I have to ask: is the state doing their fair share, or is the county having to increase its funding to both bring teacher salaries to competitive levels or to supplement money that should be and could be coming from the state?
Oh, absolutely. And we've been saying this for a very long time that the state of North Carolina, the General Assembly, does not, I believe, do enough to fund K-12 education in North Carolina. In addition to that, I want people to also understand that in other counties, basically, I think it's 96 of the 100 counties, they actually get a supplement, a state supplement for teachers from the state of North Carolina. Mecklenburg County, Wake County, and a couple of others actually do not get that state supplement that every other county gets. So Mecklenburg County and those other counties are actually paying more than other counties in the state of North Carolina for teacher pay. And that is something that we really think need to be fixed.
And why don't we get the supplement?
Because they, I think, believe that we're a wealthy county and that we can afford to provide that to our teachers. And of course, we want to be able to do that. But I think this misnomer that Mecklenburg County is a wealthy county and that we can continue to afford that is not the case. And it's just basically unfair. We should get what every other county in the state of North Carolina gets when it comes to teacher pay.
And it should be pointed out that Mecklenburg County taxpayers are paying into the fund that is then distributed to other counties, not Mecklenburg, around the state for this. So we're kind of getting cheated on two sides of the equation, it looks like. In your report, you say that the compensation strategy deployed by CMS over the years has already paid dividends. How so?
Well, they've actually seen their vacancy rate and their turnover rate decline by 4% in 1 year. And we think, and after talking to Dr. Hill, we really believe that if we can continue to pay competitive salaries and benefits, that she can retain qualified teachers. And so by making that investment, I think we're seeing some really good results. I mean, I think what she says, I know she says, is that you need an excellent teacher in every classroom for kids to be able to be successful, and having competitive compensation for staff is really key to that. And we want to be part of that success.
So, according to this budget proposal, Adrian, the county's total commitment to CMS next year will be $699 million, an increase of $38 million, and it represents 40%, I believe, of the county's overall fund budget. Enrollment and money coming from the state may be negatively impacted as these opportunity scholarships are rolled out across the states, tending to siphon off students from the public schools and dollars from the public schools. Will that reduce CMS expenses and future requests, do you think, for local supplements, or will it require the county to pick up even more of the costs going forward?
So that's not necessarily a yes or no question. It could possibly reduce costs, but it certainly won't reduce all of the cost if enrollment were to go down. And again, there's no guarantee that enrollment would go down, especially as the population grows. But you still have to have teachers for classrooms, and you still have to have schools, and those require fixed costs to operate every single year.
The state seems to underfund public education, at least according to the courts. They have underfunded it for decades now, and the Leandro case, which has told the state to fully fund these schools, is being ignored by the legislature. And yet you, Dena, are proposing that CMS get every dollar that they asked for in their budget request. Why is CMS such a high priority for the county when it doesn't appear to be for the state?
Because we have a responsibility to make sure that our kids get a good education. I don't, I'd love to be able to say, well, we're not, and I kind of used to think this way, well, we're not going to do it because the state should do it. But I do think that we are seeing some really good changes in CMS. I feel like we've got great leadership there now. I think we're starting to see some really great successes, and we want to support that. I think, a lot of it is having good leadership in place and wanting to be able to make those changes that are going to be successful for every kid in the district. And so we want to be part of that.
Workforce development, of course, is a priority for the county, and you can't have workforce development if you have a lousy public school system or undereducated citizens out there. And those two things continue to be key priorities. CPCC funding is a combination of those two things, workforce development and education. You're recommending funding Central Piedmont to the tune of $49 million. That's a slight increase of $1.7 million over last year. What is that money earmarked for?
Adrian, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So the majority of that funding is simply for operating the campus. So it's maintenance. It's also maintenance vehicles. It's security, and there's a very small portion of that that goes for salaries, not faculty salaries, but for kind of their management salaries. So that's pretty much it. The majority of the operating for CPC comes from the state. It doesn't come from the county. What we provide is really for the facilities.
And that's mandated. So we're required to fund that.
So since you say that the CMS money that being put towards CMS is already paying dividends, the way they're dealing with money at CMS is paying dividends, is the way CPCC is using the money paying dividends.
Absolutely. We're seeing so many more programs and partnerships that Central Piedmont is developing with external partners to making sure that there's pathways for high school students to be able to go to CP and to be able to, to pursue higher education. The middle colleges or early colleges that they have as well are really paying dividends to students, really working with kids that finish CP to be able to go to a 4-year college after that. They've got a number of partnerships there. I think we're really seeing more of a systemic approach to how CP fits into the educational system and how they're working with external partners to make sure that there is that continuum and everybody has really the same opportunities to pursue a 4-year degree or a credential in something else they may be interested in.
So economic development is obviously one of the key thrusts and one of the key focuses of your budget. It has been for years, but part of that, a subset of that, is economic mobility. Upward mobility is another focus. And part of that is pre-K. Explain to me how pre-K education helps economic development.
So I think we know that we've studied this research, and the research is very clear that a child that goes to preschool and has a quality pre-K experience has better outcomes over their lifetime than children who do not. They are more likely to graduate high school, go to college, they'll earn more over their lifetime, they're less likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. And so we know that a 4-year-old education has a tremendous return on investment. And so that child will have a higher economic impact to the community and have much higher opportunities for economic mobility.
There are lots of other things that the county budget takes for social services and public health and other things that the city does not do that the county is responsible for, which all come into play when we're talking about this budget. But all of that is preamble to the news, of course, that for the second year in a row, you are recommending a property tax increase. Both the county and the city raised property taxes. Last year, the city apparently plans to hold the line, although they too could probably use a property tax increase. They plan to hold the line this year. Why can't you?
Well, I think Adrian explained that when you look at, the cost of providing our services and what it costs to operate our government and the revenues that we still have this $29 million budget gap. In addition to that, the city doesn't fund education. So, for example, if I didn't have to fund CMS at $28 million, I wouldn't have had a budget gap and I wouldn't have had to raise taxes. But that is a county responsibility. We take that seriously. And so when you look at it collectively, it's not just CMS. But you look collectively at all the things that we have to fund. A very small property tax increase was necessary. And I will say, we do take that very seriously. We never want to raise the property tax rate because even though it's very small, it does impact families here in Mecklenburg County. So we're very cognizant of that. And we really want to make sure that we only do it when it's absolutely necessary.
So will this property tax rate, if it's accepted as you're proposing it, erase that $29 million deficit?
Yes.
This budget, Adrian, proposes a 96-cent per $100 value increase in the property tax. That is on top of last year's 1.5 cent increase. We know that in the last several years, a faltering real estate market, commercial real estate market, has thrown more of the onus on residential property owners to fund the property tax. Is that still the case, or are things in the commercial sector improving?
So that really only impacts whenever we do a revaluation. We are seeing, some changes in values with commercial properties, and so we're watching that very, very closely. I did want to note, you mentioned a 1.5 cent increase. Last year, we actually only did a 1 cent increase because that half cent was deferred. But in terms of your average homeowner, in terms of a median homeowner in Mecklenburg County, we calculated that impact for a year to be $36.19, the impact of this 0.96 cent increase.
The real estate market in this city for resale homes and even new homes has been really tight for years. People are staying put, which means that all these newcomers are moving into apartments around the area, buildings that they do not own in most cases. And a lot of apartment buildings have been and are continuing to be built to accommodate these people. When we come back, I want to find out if those property owners are paying their fair share of these property taxes and how that works out. We'll do that when we come back with Adrian Cox, the Mecklenburg County Budget Director, and Dena Diorio, Mecklenburg County Manager, on Charlotte Talks.
Coming up on 1A, our local, state, and federal government are required by law to share information with us, the public, but often they choose secrecy. Coming up on 1A, we take a closer look at government secrecy and the local residents fighting back, plus why transparency matters for our democracy. That's at 10 o'clock.
This is A. Martinez, host of NPR's Morning Edition. One of the things you can count on from NPR and this station, we've got your back when it comes to reporting on the news. And one of the things the station counts on to keep it all going, contributions from listeners. One way you can contribute is to donate a vehicle you no longer need. It's free to you, easy to do, and could be worth hundreds of dollars in support. If you don't need it, donate it. Thanks.
To get the process started, visit WFAE.org/cars.
I'm Steve Harrison, WFAE's politics reporter. From the Government Center in Uptown to the State House in Raleigh, the decisions politicians make affect you every day. And in an increasingly polarized political landscape, it's harder than ever to cut through the noise and get to the facts. That's why I publish the Inside Politics newsletter every Friday, to bring you the inside story. Sign up for free at WFAE.org/newsletters.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener funded 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking about the proposed county budget, Mecklenburg County budget, with Dena Diorio, the person who proposed it. She's the Mecklenburg County manager. Adrian Cox is Mecklenburg County's budget director. We do see all these apartment buildings going up around town to accommodate the influx of new people in a very tight real estate market where a lot of homes are not going on the market because people can't afford to move anyplace. They're pretty much set in stone where they can go. So these apartment buildings are cropping up, and renters don't pay property taxes, but the people who own those buildings and operate them do. And I'm just curious, when you have, I don't know, 200, 300 units on a piece of property, are you getting the property tax revenue that would be commensurate with what putting single-family homes or duplexes or for-sale townhomes would generate for the county? Or is it more than what would be generated by single-family property owners? Adrian?
So if I understand the question, certainly a multi-unit apartment complex or condos, those are going to be valued more than a single home. And there is going to be, they pay the same tax rate, but the rate is based upon that value. And oftentimes they do, pass that cost to the folks who are renting from them, because they have to get the income from somewhere. So they do pay a higher tax if it's a higher value piece of property. And of course, we also have to pay services to serve a larger number of people who are living there.
So what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is, I don't know how much acreage it takes to put a big apartment building on a piece of land, but because you're squeezing 200 units on a piece of property that might be able to accommodate 20 townhomes or maybe 10 single family homes, are you actually making more money from these apartment buildings than you would from single family homes? That's the question.
I don't know that I know the answer to that, because I don't develop a lot of real estate. But the tax rate is levied on the value of the property.
Okay. So I know that along with the city, affordable housing is a major concern of the county. And if property taxes rise, housing becomes less affordable. As rents rise, those housing units become less affordable. Where's the breaking point, Dena?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to say where the breaking point is. I think that, again, we just are very thoughtful when we do a property tax increase and try to minimize the impact as much as possible. And as Adrian indicated, this property tax increase for a median value home is $36 a year, which is about $3 a month. And so not saying that everybody can absorb that as easily as others, but we are very thoughtful about making sure that we minimize the impact as much as possible.
And when you were putting this budget together and realized that a property tax increase was likely to be needed, did the fact that we may is a big word, have a sales tax referendum for the 1-cent transit sales tax on the ballot in November, did that enter your mind? Because it seems to me if the county raises property taxes and they put this on the ballot, people may say, enough with the taxes, no.
Well, there's certainly a risk there. I certainly understand that. I think one of the things I'll say about the sales tax is a significant portion of that sales tax is paid by people who don't live in Mecklenburg County, people who come to visit, people who come work here and live someplace else. So that tax burden is actually shared across a broader spectrum of individuals than a property tax increase would be. So while it is something that we need to take into consideration, we still have to run our government. We still have to provide services. Our taxpayers expect us to do that, and we try to do that in the most efficient way possible.
What kind of reaction have you gotten to this proposed tax increase and to the proposed cuts that you are making in your attempt to balance this budget and stay fiscally responsible?
So I think, our nonprofit sector, we reached out to them as soon as we made those decisions before I presented my budget, and they were obviously disappointed by the decisions that we made. And I know some of them have reached out directly to the Board of County Commissioners to express their displeasure, and we expected that. So we're not really surprised. We have our public hearing Thursday night, and so I'm sure we'll hear a lot about that when we have our public hearing. I'll be honest, I haven't gotten any feedback, negative or positive, about the tax increase. Now, I don't know what the board's received, but I certainly haven't received any feedback at this point.
You said at the beginning that this is your last budget, and it's not the budget that you would have hoped to have been able to present because of this need for additional property taxes and this shortfall in revenue and the deficit that we have right now. But this is the last budget that you will present. Did the reality of that play into some of these decisions?
Well, I mean, I really wanted to leave Mike Bryant, the incoming county manager, with the cleanest budget that I possibly could because I want him to be able to move forward in the most positive way possible. So, just because I'm leaving doesn't mean that I would do anything that I wouldn't do if I was still going to be here. So I really wanted to make sure that we cleaned up some stuff and made sure that everything was as tight as possible so that when he goes forward in his next budget, he doesn't have to make any decisions or difficult decisions as it relates to structural deficit or other things. So really, I was very mindful of that.
You have been Mecklenburg County's manager since 2014, and one of the hallmarks of your approach to this job over the years has been the straightforwardness that you seem to present. You tend to tell it like it is. You don't sugarcoat the pill very much. Where does that come from in you? Is that the Northeasterner, the Connecticut, New Jersey, New Yorker in you?
Well, I think it's just easier. I mean, if you just tell it like it is, everybody knows where you stand, and I think people appreciate people who are straightforward, and just, I don't know, that's just my personality. What can I tell you? That's how I am. I've always been
You were
like.
the first woman to run Mecklenburg County. Channel 9 did a story about you in which they portrayed you as a barrier breaker. Is that how you view yourself, as a barrier breaker?
I think I've done I think I've had the opportunity to do some really interesting and good work as Mecklenburg County manager. And so I think when you have the opportunity to sit in this chair, whether you're a female, male, whatever, you need to take advantage of the opportunity to really have a positive impact on your community. And that's what I've really tried to do as manager. And if that makes me a barrier breaker, then I'll take that.
You leave this job incredibly well respected by people you have dealt with. Last year, when the county commission was debating your pay rate for this final year on the job, Commissioner Vilma Leak said that she would give you $1 million if she could, because, quote, you need to know now and not later what people think about you. That strikes me as both rare and highly gratifying. What did that comment mean to you?
Well, it means everything. I mean, those kinds of comments, to know that, my board respects me and they've given me so much latitude and so much trust to do good work. I feel incredibly fortunate and very blessed that I had the opportunity to work with this group of county commissioners, as well as all the commissioners that I've worked with since 2014. And I really believe that I'm leaving Mecklenburg County better than when I found it. I'm really proud of the work that I've done, that my team has done, that my employees have done. I think we're a high-performing organization. We believe in transparency and accountability, and we're relevant. I think Mecklenburg County is relevant. People want us to be at the table when important conversations are happening, and I'm really proud of that. I think we've done some really great things.
We have been known on this program, and other guests have been known on this program, to complain about the seeming lack of transparency at the city, with the city. And I know the city and county are different entities with different responsibilities, but what's the downside? Is there a downside to being more transparent?
Never. I just I don't see it. I think it's, as a government, if you want people to trust you as a government, you have to be transparent and accountable. They have to know how their dollars are being spent. They have to understand how things work and the decisions that we're making and how we're making those decisions and why. And I believe that's the reason that we have as much respect as we do, because we are transparent. Public records requests, we respond to those as quickly as we can because we have nothing to hide. I mean, we're an open book here, and so we really believe that that's a critically important part of public trust.
You occupy the same building as the city. I'm wondering why the difference in approach.
Everyone's got their different styles and different approaches to how they do the work. I do it my way, and my counterparts do it their way.
Will that continue under Mike Bryant's leadership, do you think?
I absolutely do think it will, because our board demands it. I mean, it's not, I help facilitate that, but our board really believes in accountability and transparency, and they're going to expect that from Mike, just like they expected it from me.
You've had to deal with a lot as county manager. You'd have to go way, way, way back. I'm not even sure we had a county manager back when the 1918 flu pandemic hit Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, but no one in recent memory has had to deal with a pandemic that shut down the government, that shut down commerce, shut down the schools for almost a year. That had to have been an enormous challenge. Was it your biggest?
Absolutely. There's no playbook on how to work or operate or manage during a worldwide pandemic. And, very fortunate again, we had great partnerships and relationships with all of our partners. And I certainly didn't do it alone. We worked together every single day to make sure that we were in step and making sure that we were making decisions that we believe were based on data and science. And again, try to communicate as much information as possible, being transparent with the public about what was going on. Could we always do things better? You can always do things better, but I think in light of the circumstances, I think as a community, we fared fairly well.
What would you say your biggest success was over these past years?
My biggest what?
Success.
Oh, I think one of the things I'm most proud of, obviously, is the fact that we are a high performing organization. We believe in accountability. We believe in transparency. And I think we're just a much better organization than we were when I found it, when I got here and was moved into this position. In terms of initiatives, I know I talk about this all the time. I'm really proud of Mech Pre-K. I think those, I found out yesterday actually that we've served over 9,000 children since we've started that program. And that's generational, transformational change in those kids' lives, which I'm incredibly proud of.
Any disappointments, any regrets?
I don't know if there's any regrets. I mean, I think, you always try to do better, and I've learned a lot. I mean, I've misstepped. I'm not going to say that I'm, perfect. I'm not perfect. But I'm telling you, I'm a much better county manager now than I was when I took the chair in 2014. You learn a lot in this job. And, so no regrets, but always think we can do better.
I'm not going to give away your age because that would be impolite, but you're retiring younger than most people do. And I know it's a stressful job, but why did you decide that now is the time to
So in
turn the
case
reins?
everybody's wondering, I'm 63, so I don't mind telling people how old I am. There was a few reasons. First, we had a new leadership on our board, Commissioner Jarrell and Commissioner Altman, younger leadership. They have a lot of energy. They want to do great things. And I really think that they should build a relationship with the county manager of the future and really work on those things that they want to work on. I really, this is going to sound kind of weird, but I really feel that leading younger people, the younger generation, and how they work and how they want to work is very different than how I was brought up. And I think a younger leader will be more in touch to be able to lead a younger workforce. And I think that's critical for the county and to be successful going forward. So I thought about that quite a bit. And maybe some people don't know this, but my husband died when he was 68 years old, never collected a single Social Security check, never got to retire. And I made a commitment to myself that that was not going to be me and that I was going to retire when I was young and healthy enough to enjoy it. And so I'm doing that.
You told Eric Spanberg, our colleague with the Business Journal, that you have accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish in your career and that you have been very successful. There's no question about that. You've been recognized for your great work and for your leadership. I don't view that as boastful. I view that as fact. That must feel amazing to be able to look back on a long career at doing many different things over time and perhaps not doing what you thought you would do when you were in college and had your aspirations in front of you. What's it feel like to look back and be able to say that about yourself and your career?
Well, I mean, it's true. I really feel like I've had a tremendous impact here in Mecklenburg County. I feel like I had an impact on the other organizations that I worked for before I came here. I consider myself an impact player. When I show up to make change. That's how I'm wired. And you get to a point where there's always going to be more to do, but it's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to let the next person take it on and have some successes, and take the county and the organization to the next level. But I've had an incredibly great career and I've been very successful. And I'm very proud. I feel very proud of what I've accomplished.
What would you say to young people just starting out who would like to be able to say what you just said about yourself at the end of their careers when they decide to retire? What would you say about how to approach what they're going to go through in the next 40 years of their lives?
Well, there's always going to be ups and downs. And what I tell employees a lot, because we talk about this when I meet with employees, they always talk about wanting to get to the next promotion, to the next level. And I always say, you need to be great at the job you have today. If you're great at the job you have today, people will notice that. And I also tell them that relationships are critical, that people, they always say it's not who you know, it's what you know, or what you know, who you know, but who you know matters. And having relationships with people and doing that networking, is really very, very important. And so I tell people, be great at the job that you do today and build relationships with people. Go out, talk to people, explore, learn, work outside your comfort zone. Those are all the things that I think made me successful.
So we have about a minute left.
Mhm.
When you walk out the door and hand over the keys to Mike Bryant at the end of June, what's your plan? I'm just curious about what are you going to do all day?
Well, I don't know every day, but I'm going to work on some nonprofit boards. I'm on the Dress for Success Charlotte board. I'm the secretary and the co-chair of the capital campaign. I'll be working on that. I'm still on the Alliance Health board. I'll still do that work. So that'll get me busy. I want to play a lot more golf. I want to exercise more. I want to learn how to cook. I want to travel. So all the things that I haven't had an opportunity to do. I'm learning how to play mahjong, which is all the rage these days. So a lot of things to keep me busy.
Boy, everything old is new again. Mahjong, interesting. I did not anticipate that. Good luck in your retirement. Thank you for being on this program many times in the past. Dena Diorio, the outgoing Mecklenburg County manager, and earlier in the program, Adrian Cox, the budget director. Thanks for the hour.
Thank
Charlotte
you.
Talks is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from